Thank you, Dean LaCourse, and thank you for the invitation, Carl, for me to speak here today. As the Dean mentioned, I've been working on coronaviruses for a number of years. Actually, we've been working on viruses for the past 2.5 decades, but started working on coronaviruses about 2013, 2012, when it wasn't popular, and when we were told by NIH study sections that, well, yeah, this MERS thing, it's just a small outbreak and it's never going to hit the United States, so we shouldn't really worry about it. Well, guess we're having second thoughts about that now. So I think as we approach the 2-year mark for this pandemic that we've been all suffering through, it's worth it to point out this isn't the first pandemic or outbreak that we've suffered through, nor is it likely to be the last. And I think that's the important thing I want you to think about today. And you can see here some of the different outbreaks that have occurred. And actually, I want to point out the MERS outbreak. That's actually still going on. And so even though that was first noted in 2012, and then there was a second outbreak in 2015 in South Korea, and I actually happened to be there at the time, that was spread by one person, one super spreader. And now we've seen the effects of how fast a pandemic can actually travel around the globe because of the way we travel and how we interact with each other. And so, as Letitia pointed out a few minutes ago, we have had a lot of information available to us very rapidly, unlike in previous years. And I think one of the problems that has arisen is that people don't really understand how we treat viruses. As you know, there has been much talk about different drugs that came and went, antibiotics, anti-parasitic drugs, anti-malarial drugs, things like that. Those don't work against viruses. Vaccines definitely are important, but they're for prevention. They're not treatments. Steroids are useful, but they treat the symptoms, not the actual virus. They don't kill the virus. Monoclonal antibodies are helpful, and we're seeing a lot of those now being introduced. And that sort of boosts our immune system, and that's important. But the best way to kill a virus is to use a direct-acting antiviral small molecule drugs. And thankfully, that's what I've been working on for 25 years. So we're finally seeing our day in the sun. As a recent reporter from the Baltimore Sun said to me, oh, it must feel great hitting the pinnacle of your career at age 62. She had to out my age? Really? So here you can see some nucleosides. Now, I have worked on nucleosides my entire career, and there's a reason why. Because nucleosides have been the cornerstone of antiviral, anti-cancer, anti-parasitic drug design for many, many decades. And here you can see some of the more popular ones that some of you may even be aware of. AZT was one of the first nucleosides that was used for treating HIV. Acyclovir treats herpes. And you can see tenofovir, which is a very important acyclic nucleoside that's actually a component in almost every single drug cocktail that is used today to treat HIV and also treats HBV. And it not just confined to viruses, nucleosides also, as I mentioned, treat cancer. And here you can see some on the bottom of the slide that are active against cancer. So as I mentioned, I have been working in nucleosides my whole career. And a number of years ago, back when I was at Georgia Tech, we were working on a project that involved these expanded and extended pyrimidines and purine nucleosides. Sort of how far can we push Mother Nature? And I happened to be at a conference, and I was suffering through the worst, most boring talk I've ever been at. And I was sitting there, and I was doodling and trying to stay awake. And all of a sudden, I thought to myself, if I hit this tricyclic nucleoside with the sulfur in it, with Raney nickel, that would pop that sulfur out of there, and that would keep those two pieces still stuck together, and they'd be able to move and rotate and sort of move around and all that, and that was basically the birth of the fleximers, and that's what I've spent my entire career on now since that time. And yes, this is my gratuitous picture of one of my 7 grandchildren, and by the way, she stayed that way for 30 minutes. I don't understand how. So anyway, she's probably mortified if she knew I showed this, because now she's 10. So anyway. So here's the fleximers, and we first called these molecular chameleons. And the idea here was that, and you can see there's 2 different basic scaffolds of the parent compounds, and we call these the distals, where they're connected at the bottom of the purine ring, or the proximals, where they're connected at the top. And the idea here being that, like a chameleon, a flexible drug should be able to adapt to its environment. Now, we know that chameleons, if they don't change color and blend in with the background, they get eaten. So we were hoping that our flexible drugs would be able to adapt to their environment, in other words, an enzyme binding site involved in the mechanism of action for a virus or whatever, and that they would be able to overcome this if the binding site mutated. And we're very aware of this today, because we all hear about all these different variants, particularly the Delta. And what happens is that binding site in the enzyme mutates, because it's figured out you're trying to kill it. And so it changes the interactions that your drug would be normally interacting with. And so what our drugs can do, however, is sort of move and sort of, as one of my colleagues put it, wiggle and jiggle in the binding site to retain their activity. It's also led to increased activity, as well as the ability to overcome these resistance mechanisms and variants, and also to exhibit activity against unexpected targets. And we've shown that they can do all of the above, including against SARS-CoV-2. One of our first early evidence as to this might actually work, we were working on an enzyme involved in a lot of viral replication. It's actually a host enzyme, not a viral enzyme, but it's important for the replication anyway, S-adenosyl homocysteine hydrolase. And this is actually an enzyme that only recognizes adenosine analogs. And what we found, to our surprise, was that this guanosine nucleoside actually served to be a very good inhibitor of this adenosine metabolizing enzyme. And this was, to our knowledge, to this day, the only G nucleoside that has ever shown that ability. And this is actually where the title of my talk came from, is bending over backwards, right? And what we found was there was an intramolecular hydrogen bond between the base and the sugar that then put the amino group up into the binding pocket where you would expect the adenosine to bind. And so we essentially created an adenosine mimic. And that was sort of the first of many, many successes that we've seen with these. And actually, this is, I'm particularly proud of. We hit the cover of this paper, this particular journal, ChemBiochem, last year, and this was a present from one of my previous graduate students. She had Tony Bainey, UMBC's glass blower, make a fleximer out of glass. And this was TK's last paper. She was also a Meyerhoff student. And so I just wanted to show this. This was her last paper, and this was her gift. And we were really pleased that this got to be on the cover. So now back to, as I mentioned, in 2015, we started working on we had already been working on coronaviruses, but we published the first paper, the first report of a nucleoside analog being active in low micromolar activity against SARS-1 and MERS, and also human coronaviruses. And this was a fleximer that was designed after the FDA-approved acyclovir, which you saw a few minutes ago. This is a drug that is used to treat herpes viruses. It has absolutely no effect against coronaviruses whatsoever. And in 2016, we noted very potent activity against filoviruses, Ebola, Marburg, and Sudan. And again, acyclovir is inactive. And then in 2020, we had phenomenal activity, nanomolar level activity. That's what we all look for, is really, really low, against flaviviruses, including dengue, Zika, yellow fever, and tick-borne encephalitis. And again, acyclovir is inactive. And this really shows you the power of using the Fleximer technology on these nucleoside drugs. So that brings us to today and SARS-CoV-2. And here you can see some of the nucleosides that are being looked at. Obviously, I think everybody in this room knows about remdesivir. And last week, Merck announced that they were seeking emergency approval for molnupiravir. And AT527 is also one that is being looked at. And favipiravir is another one. It doesn't start off as a nucleoside. It starts off as the base, but then is converted to the nucleoside in your body. And finally, our fleximers. And so what we've seen so far very quickly is that flexacyclovir, the protide, the McGuigan protide of this, we've done maximum tolerated dose studies with Dr. Bieberich in biology. And we see almost no effect to the mice, even after 10 days. And our newest analog, Flex AT527, and my grad student who works on this is actually sitting right over there. And he's very excited about this because this is even better than flexacyclovir. And we have a number of different pharmacokinetic and mechanistic studies currently underway. And we have very good activity, low micromolar activity against SARS-CoV-2. And they're going to be in animals, in infected animals in the next few weeks. And in terms of our next steps, commercialization, UMBC is great about helping you with commercialization. And to date, we've had 4 biotech companies that have expressed interest in licensing our Fleximer technologies. And I took time out today to come give this talk, but I'm in the middle of 3 $15 million grant proposals that are due next week. And so if look a little tired, that's why, because I've been working on this nonstop. And then last November, I started my own company, Flexivir Biosciences, and that's now official. I haven't done anything with it, but it looks good, I guess, to be a CEO of something. And I wish I could tell you more, but of course time is short, and I have to give credit to all of my collaborators, all of the funding agencies, and of course my graduate students who do all the hard work, and my colleagues in the department and at UMBC. And I thank you for the invitation to speak here today.